Joining us now to break down the nexus of media and politics is Dinesh D'Souza, the best-selling author and documentarian and creator of the new film, Trump Card. So Dinesh, this week there's been a lot of conversation about conservative content not necessarily getting the right type of exposure, I guess. I mean, the New York Post story is the most recent example, but by no means is this a new conversation when it comes to tech, Hollywood, whatever it may be. So with your new film coming out, have you experienced any of this yourself?
We have. We've experienced all kinds of obstacles that are not normal. And of course, this is my fifth film, so it's not as if we haven't been around this block. But we've noticed difficulties with distributors, difficulties with outlets, difficulties even with Amazon. Now, Amazon claims that they have sort of a glitch that has made it difficult for them to make our movie available, but there's a backlog on the physical DVD, and they haven't uploaded on Amazon Prime. Now, we are on a number of other platforms, happily, iTunes, Google, YouTube, Comcast, Xfinity. So there are places to get the movie, for sure, but we've also encountered difficulties that we did not expect.
And it's interesting that these glitches always seem to be working one way. You know, I don't see these glitches necessarily happening when it comes to Disney movies or anything like that. But I think it's interesting, too, because your movies are not just low-budget indie movies or anything like that. They are blockbusters. I mean, they are huge revenue creators. People all around the world see your films. So the idea that they don't have the same type of exposure, I'll say, or the access to the average American is problematic for a lot of people as well. So when, say, for example, you're talking to someone who does want to be a conservative filmmaker or someone who wants to get involved in Silicon Valley, what advice do you have for those people to really break through?
Well, I would say that it's important to not only create your own institutions and companies, but to try to do it independent of Hollywood. Because if you make a film and you hire people who are in Hollywood, they will say to you, oh man, I can't put my name on your film because I need work after this film is over, and so I've got to go incognito. So there's an underground conservative movement in Hollywood, but think of how unhealthy it is that they've created such an atmosphere of intolerance that we're not talking about extreme or hate views. We're talking about mainstream conservative and Republican and Christian views are seen as beyond the pale. Now, the digital censorship, I think, has reached a kind of new level with the censoring of the New York Post story, a much more blatant type of censorship. They're censoring, really, a newspaper founded by Alexander Hamilton on a legitimate news story and on completely bogus pretexts.
And I think it's quite literally viewpoint discrimination, too. I mean, when you look at the fact that it's, as you were saying, the New York Post, one of the most distributed newspapers in the entire country. Twitter, by the way, is not saying that they're censoring it because of disinformation. They're saying that they can't independently verify the information themselves, which is a standard that has not been applied to the New York Times when it came to President Trump's tax records, when it came to anything, the Pentagon Papers, for example. I mean, we could talk about what journalism is, and the fact that Twitter decided to take action on this front is within itself problematic. But you bring up something that I think is representative of the idea of media consolidation. I mean, you bring up the idea that there's an underground conservative movement, but half the country is conservative, and they are not represented when it comes to Hollywood or things like that. So do you think that plays into the issue, that there is too much media consolidation, a few select elites, if you will, making decisions not representative of the majority?
Well, I mean, think about it. The digital world is made up of just a handful of platforms, and they are, as far as I can tell, all controlled by the left. We're building alternative platforms. Rumble is kind of an alternative to YouTube. Parler is kind of an alternative to Twitter. I'm on both those platforms, but that is the slow work of building from the ground up. Hollywood is a very incestuous community, very tight-knit, very difficult to break in if you're on the outside. I don't even try to break in. I'd rather make independent movies outside of Hollywood because this way they have no hold on me. And so, you know, swinging back to this New York Post article, the Twitter rationale, we have to kind of verify the story ourselves. We have to, quote, provide context. This is completely idiotic and doesn't explain how knowledge is created. I mean, knowledge is created by putting out what you know and then adding to it later and then having criticism and corroboration. I mean, Woodward and Bernstein could never verify all of Watergate at the outset. So if you demanded that they name Deep Throat and verify all their sources, there'd be no way the story could even have appeared under the sort of Twitter standard. So I think this is a bogus standard being selectively applied.
And it comes back to the idea, too, that a lot of people live in their own echo chambers. They don't want to hear the other side of the argument. And I think your movie is a good example of that because, for example, in your film Trump Card, you touch on the Biden allegations, the Ukraine allegations, the ties to China, things of that nature. And a lot of conservatives are saying, you know, we've heard this before, but now we're starting to see some actual evidence backing up our claims. But a lot of those on the left are saying, you know, I've never heard of this before. I don't even believe it. I don't want to hear it. Does that speak to the idea of maybe people aren't being informed in the proper way because they're only looking to be kind of solidified in what they already think?
Well, the thing about the left-wing journalists is that they know. And the reason they know is that Biden's been in politics for 47 years. How do you have multiple homes, access to private planes, domestic staff on a government salary? It's impossible. Now, it could be that it's because Biden's brothers are massive entrepreneurs and have sort of invented the iPhone and done things like that. No, they're a bunch of losers. And essentially, their only credential is to have the last name Biden. So they have all become sort of bagmen for Joe Biden. They go with him everywhere he goes. They strike side deals. They collect bucketfuls of cash. And the left, the journalistic left, is in on it. They know about it, but they're covering up for Biden because they see him as a preferable alternative to Trump.
I mean, it's a fascinating conversation to have because, I mean, when we talk about our democracy, a big part of it is the people who participated being educated about the decisions that they're voting for, that they're taking place in. So I think it's really important for them to get both sides of this issue. And I want to make sure that your film gets seen by those who do want to see it. So once again, the film Trump Card, can you tell our viewers where they can see it?
Yeah, Trump Card is not in the theater, but it's available on physical DVD. You can get it at Walmart or Target. It's also available on video on demand. So it's available on Apple iTunes, on Google, on YouTube, also on Xfinity and some other sites. TrumpCardTheMovie.com is the website. So go to TrumpCardTheMovie.com and you can see how you can watch this film.
Yeah, we got the poster for it on the screen right now there, and I've talked to a lot of people too who have already seen it. It came out, I believe, 2 weeks ago, and it's already making a lot of headway. A lot of people are already talking about it. So, Dinesh D'Souza, I really appreciate you coming on the program tonight, talking about the whole nexus of media, politics, as well as your new film. Thank you.
My pleasure.